My name is Nora Whitfield, and I used to be the woman who always bowed her head in apology, always wondering what I had done wrong when my husband walked into the house without even looking at me once. I didn't cry when he said I was nothing, but I did cry when I found out he disappeared on a rainy night, leaving his car by the lake and a suicide note that mentioned my name. The whole town started whispering, "Did she push him to the edge?" But if you knew what I had been through, the daily mockery, the strangling hands in the dark, the debts under my name, would you still think I was the one to blame? Have you ever had someone quietly destroy your spirit? Leave a comment if you know that feeling. And don't forget to like and subscribe, because in the next part, I'll tell you the truth I've been forced to stay silent about for 8 years. I met Chase Whitfield one afternoon in April. He walked into the insurance office where I worked as a receptionist, carrying the scent of expensive oak wood and a smile that seemed to soften the entire room. He wasn't movie star handsome, but he had the confidence of a man who knew people paid attention. His tie was always perfectly in place, shirt sleeves rolled up neatly to reveal a Rolex I'd only seen in ads. Chase was a regional sales manager for a chain distributing industrial equipment. He came to our office every 2 weeks, saying it was to check in on the insurance policy, but he always stayed longer than necessary. At first it was business talk, then coffee outside, and later late nights at a lakeside bar where the dim lights made people listen more and trust more than they should. I didn't realize it was conditional love when Chase said, "You make me feel safe, not like those other women always trying to compete." I thought he was complimenting me. Looking back now, that was the first of many sweet-sounding words that drained me. We got married after 18 months of dating. My mom was worried because I barely knew his family. My dad, a gentle, quiet man, simply said, "If it feels right, go for it." I thought it felt right, or maybe I wanted to believe it did. Right after the wedding, Chase told me we should merge finances because husband and wife are one. I agreed. I thought it meant trust. I never thought I needed a separate account, because what did I have to keep separate? He said, "I'll handle all the money, you don't need to worry." And I never taught anything about personal finance. Deposited my entire paycheck into our joint account, only to be given back a small portion each month as spending money. When I asked, "Honey, I want to take an evening office skills class on Tuesdays," Chase raised an eyebrow. "You're cute, you know that? But someone like you doesn't need to try so hard. You're not exactly the ambitious type." I chuckled. He said it gently, but inside it felt like someone had turned down my volume and left it that way. 3 months after the wedding, he brought me to the bank, said he needed my name on the mortgage loan to help prove household income. When I hesitated, Chase leaned in close to my ear. "Trust me, I've thought this through. You don't need to understand the details, just sign here and everything will be fine." I signed, out of trust, or maybe out of hesitation, afraid to ask more. I still remember one night, our first evening in the new house, I spilled a bit of water on the hardwood floor. Chase stood there watching me clean, then laughed. "A woman like you investing money? That'd be a disaster. Better leave that to me. You just stick to mopping floors." That line made his friends laugh out loud. I laughed too, but for some reason my throat felt tight. After that, every time I wanted to buy something, a juice or a set of old books, I had to ask. And most of the time I got shut down. "You don't need that. You're really going to waste money on that junk? Do you even know how much you spend each month? I'm not a money printer." Eventually I stopped asking. I also started to realize Chase didn't want me to grow. He didn't want me to grow financially, intellectually, or legally. He only wanted me dependent. One time I jokingly mentioned learning how to cook Thai food. Maybe I should take a cooking class. Could be fun and useful. He shrugged. "Cooking? You're not even good at it. Besides, everyone lies and says their wife's food is good, even if it's trash." I smiled, but that night I made instant noodles for myself and left him to reheat leftovers on his own. Maybe the thing that hurt most wasn't those words, it was that I started to believe them. I started thinking I really wasn't good. I started thinking I wasn't worth investing in. Maybe I wasn't smart enough to choose the right insurance plan, or informed enough to buy an air fryer without getting scammed. And when you live long enough in a relationship where every day denies your existence, You begin to disappear. Not through actions, but through silence. I lost my voice, then my confidence, and eventually the ability to feel like I existed. But what Chase didn't know was, in that silence, I started to observe. And I remembered. The first fragments of a twisted picture I hadn't dared to face. Not all at once, but slowly I began to hear my own voice again, and from there, everything started to change. One early winter afternoon, while gathering laundry from the living room, my hand brushed against the pocket of Chase's charcoal knit coat, draped over the chair. I'm not the type to snoop in my husband's things. But that coat had been there for 3 days, like it was no longer of any use, and I figured I'd throw it in the wash. When I reached into the pocket, I felt something hard, like glass. I pulled out a small, slightly bent, full-color photo, probably printed on a home printer. In the photo was Chase, sitting in a cozy family-style restaurant, warm yellow lighting, his arm wrapped around a young brunette woman, and next to her a little boy, maybe 5, grinning with eyes almost identical to Chase's. I don't know how long I stood frozen. My heart was pounding, ears ringing like a hairdryer was running nearby. I placed the photo on the table and waited until Chase came home. He walked in close to 8 p.m., later than usual. No heads up, wearing a new cologne, not mine and definitely not from the office. I didn't beat around the bush. I spoke calmly, softly. I found this in your coat pocket. I slid the photo toward him. Chase glanced down, then looked up quickly. A few seconds of silence. Then, as if a switch flipped, he smacked the glass cup off the table, shattering it on the tile floor. You going through my stuff now? Digging through my pockets? I took a step back, not out of fear, instinct. Who is she? I asked, trying to stay steady. Client, he nearly screamed. What do you think I'm doing out there, huh? I'm working to support this house, while you sit here snooping and making up crap? A client, dinner out, arm around her, and a child looking at him with such familiar eyes? I let the silence speak for me. Chase stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard the wedding photo on the wall shifted. I didn't move. No tears came, only a cold tightness in my chest, as if it had been plunged into ice water. After that night, I started watching more closely. Chase came home late often, sometimes 7 p.m., sometimes 8:30, always with a reason. Meeting a client, traffic, conference call with Chicago, but his phone was always face down. When texts came in, he didn't check. Once I caught a glimpse of Nicole, accounting on the screen, but when I asked, he simply smirked coldly. Don't be nosy, it's normal for men to have female coworkers. I stopped asking, but I began to notice the scents, subtle hints of vanilla perfume clinging to his shirt collar, not the kind he ever wore. I noticed how he changed, not in gestures, but in his arrogance. Like there was some other audience out there applauding him, while I was just the faded backstage. I started checking bank statements. Not the kind Chase emailed me each month, but through the mobile banking app I had installed back when I still had the password. There were new charges. Recurring every Saturday: Lakewood Diner, Belmont Park, Pine View Boutique. 3 places I'd never been to, receipts that weren't mine, $58 on lunch, $140 on shopping, unexplained transactions. One evening I asked casually, "Do you go to Belmont Park often? I saw it on the statement." Chase didn't answer right away. Then he looked at me with clear contempt. "Since when did you start policing my money? Who's the one earning in this house?" But for the first time, I didn't feel wrong. I felt aware. And that photo, the one that accidentally fell out of an old coat, opened a door I couldn't close. Once you've seen the eyes of a child with your husband's face, you can't help but ask questions. I didn't know if that boy was his. But from that moment, I knew one thing for sure. I no longer trusted Chase the way I used to. And trust, once cracked, can't be repaired with anger or tired excuses. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't leave right away. But inside, a door had opened. And I had already begun to step through it. little by little. Since that night Chase shattered the glass and screamed that she's just a client, I stopped asking. But I also stopped staying still. I started learning how to reclaim small parts of myself he hadn't taken. By day, I was still the administrative assistant at the insurance company, nodding, making coffee, greeting clients with a practiced smile. But by night, once Chase was asleep, usually after a few cans of Miller Lite and a string of sports replays, I'd open my old laptop and start studying. I picked subjects he wouldn't understand enough to belittle: SEO, basic accounting, freelance content writing. I used an old email account to sign up for classes, then created a new online bank account, transferring $75 from the weekly spending money Chase gave me. When I got my first job, writing product descriptions for a bedding store in Arizona, I cried over the $25 I earned. Not for the amount, but for the fact that I didn't need anyone's permission to earn it. I bought a second-hand phone off eBay, installed banking apps, a private email, and hid it beneath winter sweaters folded deep in the least-used drawer. Every day I lived two lives, one for Chase, the one who questioned, checked, and judged, and one for myself, where every small step, every sentence I wrote, every dollar I made belonged to me. I scheduled evening overtime, claiming I had urgent reports. Chase didn't suspect a thing. He thought I wasn't smart enough to hide anything. He often tapped my forehead and said, "You're always so naive. Someone's gonna fool you and you won't even know it." He had no idea I was the one seeing what he never meant to reveal. One Saturday afternoon, Chase left his work bag in the kitchen. I was about to toss his shirt in the wash when I heard a notification ding from his phone. I wasn't planning to touch it, but somehow I did. No password, an email open, half written, with the subject line, "Insurance documents, please file under Nicole's address." I scrolled to the attachment, and my heart dropped. A birth certificate. Mother's name Nicole Hanley, child's name Ethan Whitfield, date of birth nearly 6 years ago. Father listed Chase Whitfield. The signature was his. I couldn't breathe. I heard my own footsteps quietly move to the study. I composed myself, took screenshots of every page, and sent them to my private email. Then I cleared the browser history and turned off the screen, like I'd never touched it. That night, I made dinner as usual. Chase came home late, drunk and irritable. He ranted about freeloaders at the office and how Nicole's getting more annoying by the day. I didn't ask who Nicole was. I didn't ask about Ethan. I served him another piece of chicken, poured water, and smiled. Because I knew, at that moment, silence was the sharpest weapon I had. For the next 2 weeks, I kept freelancing at night, this time for a client in Colorado needing bookkeeping entries. I saved up $800, enough to put down a deposit on a small apartment in the northern suburbs. I didn't move out right away. But I had the key. One evening I sat staring at the photo of Ethan I had saved to my phone. The boy had Chase's nose, a dimple, and those same brown eyes. There was no more doubt. Chase had another family, another life, another role he never let me audition for. And I, the official wife, was the last to know. I thought I would break. But I didn't. The feeling was strange. Like when you're swimming in freezing water thinking you can't take it. Until your body adapts, and suddenly you see more clearly, hear more sharply, and realize you're still here. I wrote everything down in a private Google Doc: dates, screenshots, bank records, wire transfers to Nicole's address. I didn't know when I'd need it, but I knew that day was coming. I still remember the day Chase lost his job, not because the news shocked me, but because of how he told me, like it was nothing serious. That evening he came home earlier than usual. No beer in hand, no unfamiliar cologne. Just a flushed, frustrated face and a silence holding back an explosion. I was stacking files on the dining table when he muttered, "I'm out of work, lost it, damn it." I looked up, paused. "What?" Chase tossed his phone onto the table without looking at me. "They made up crap. Some intern said I harassed her. All I did was compliment her dress. Nowadays a man opens his mouth and gets labeled a creep." I said nothing. I remembered that a few weeks ago Nicole, the woman on that birth certificate, had worked in the same branch as Chase. I didn't know if she was involved this time, but everything was starting to smell. Chase lit a cigarette, hands trembling slightly. Laura's calling HR, she'll handle it, but for now I'm staying home. Then, without waiting for any response, he finished the conversation with a flat tone. And you should quit too. Can't afford two people working now. I turned to him, eyes fixed. Quit? I'm the only one with a steady income right now. Chase growled. You call that stupid job of yours steady income? I felt my voice tremble, not from fear, but from fury. That stupid income paid both our insurance premiums last month. He slammed his hand on the table, his chair crashing into the wall behind him. You trying to lecture me now? I didn't move. I was used to loud noises, but this time, it didn't stop at noise. That night, around midnight, I was lying with my back to him when I felt a sharp pressure around my neck. His hand, cold and dry, wrapped around my throat from behind. Not tight enough to cut off my breath, but enough to make me panic, enough to jolt me awake and knock the pillow onto the floor. What are you doing? I yelled, throat burning. Chase didn't answer. He stared at me, then leaned back down like nothing had happened. Sorry, he mumbled, almost dazed. Must have been a dream or something. Sat on the edge of the bed for over an hour. Frozen, too afraid to sleep again. In the dim light of the bedside lamp, I saw the red marks on my neck in the mirror. What once came as words and disdain had turned into something darker. This was violence. And it was a warning. The next morning, while Chase was still asleep, I quietly went downstairs, opened the wardrobe and pulled out my old burgundy suitcase. I packed my clothes, documents, laptop, and the small notebook where I had recorded everything, month by month, detail by detail. Private phone, separate bank card, the address of my new apartment. Everything had been ready for weeks. I just never imagined I'd leave because of hands around my throat in the dark. Before I stepped out, I looked back at the house one last time. The wedding photos on the wall, the wooden table I had picked, the curtains I was once told were a waste of money. I didn't leave a note. I opened the door, stepped out, and closed it softly, as if afraid to wake a sleeping monster. And I walked. Never looked back. Just walked. Step by step. Away from the life where I had been suffocated in silence for 8 years. I moved into my new apartment on a gray Monday morning. Wind rustled through the tree branches outside the window, sounding like the sighs of someone who had lived there before me. A one-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor. No elevator. The old wooden floor creaked gently with every step. Paint was chipped in some corners and the heater occasionally groaned like it resented being used. But the place was quiet. No drunken footsteps at 2 in the morning. No slamming doors that made your chest tighten. No eyes watching every message I received. In those first days, I lived like I was hiding. I worked online for a small startup that processed data for healthcare tech firms. The job wasn't flashy, the pay wasn't great, but they let me work remotely. And no one asked who I had been or who I used to live with. I used my maiden name, Nora Lane, the name I used to sign before I got married. Every morning I woke up before 7 a.m., pulled on an old hoodie, tied up my hair, and walked the neighborhood. Not for fitness, but to remind myself I was still alive. I often stopped by a small park behind the library, where there was a wooden bench facing a lake. I'd sit there, sipping coffee from a paper cup bought at the nearby convenience store, watching people walk their dogs and feeling like the world still moved forward, even if my heart still had cracks like shattered porcelain. Then one day, I saw Maple. A caramel-colored, curly-haired dog, skin and bones, curled up against a concrete bench in the park, no collar, back leg limping. I reached out and it stepped back, then froze. I sat down, pulled out a packet of oatmeal cookies from my bag, and offered it crumbs, piece by piece. The next morning it was still there, and the next. By the 4th day I brought it home. I named it Maple, took it to the vet, registered its chip, bought it a collar. They said it was probably abandoned. I smiled, gently stroking its back. So was I. Maple slept at the foot of my bed every night, sometimes twitching or softly whimpering in its sleep. Once it woke up barking in the middle of the night, like from a nightmare. I held it close and whispered, "It's okay, we're not in that place anymore." And I didn't know if I was speaking to it or to myself. But Chase didn't let go. The first day I moved out, he sent 12 messages. The second day, 23. The tone shifted constantly. From, "I miss you," to, "You'll regret this." From, "We can start over," to, "No one else will ever want someone like you." He started calling. Late at night, early in the morning, during work hours, his voice messages began to include pounding on doors, sobbing, even once him screaming into the phone, "Nora, you don't have the right to disappear like this." I blocked the number. He used another. I blocked that too. One morning, as I returned from the grocery store, I saw a figure standing at my door. Her hair perfectly curled, beige coat cinched tight, handbag dangling from her elbow like she had just come from a boutique. She turned as I approached, her eyes puffy but still holding that familiar disdain. "What did you do to him?" she asked, no greeting. "Oh." I set my bags down on the ground and answered softly. "I didn't do anything, Flora. I left. He's not eating, not sleeping. He sits there like a corpse." Her voice cracked. "He's lost everything." I looked at her. For the first time, her eyes weren't filled with anger, but something closer to confusion. I didn't want that to happen, but I couldn't stay because he refused to live honestly. Flora's voice softened. "He was wrong. He has issues, but you're no saint either. You destroyed this family." I was quiet for a moment, then said clearly, "No one destroys a family by protecting themselves, you know that." Flora turned away, trembling, avoiding my gaze. She pulled out a tissue, wiped her nose, then placed a small bag on the doorstep. "These are things he asked me to bring, some old photos." I didn't pick it up. I simply watched her walk away. Each step heavy, like carrying a stone on her back. I was folding laundry when the phone rang. Unknown number. A deep male voice came through, calm and chilling. "Is this Nora Whitfield?" "Yes, this is she." "This is Officer Wallace from the Fairview County Police Department. We're calling about a missing person case. A man named Chase Whitfield. He's been identified as your ex-husband." I froze, my hand still clutching a warm t-shirt fresh from the dryer. "We found his car near Boulder Dam. Keys were still inside, phone powered off, wallet untouched. In the glove compartment there was a note." The officer hesitated. "A letter. It said she destroyed me. Signed Chase Whitfield." I sat on the kitchen floor for hours, beside Maple. She rested her head on my leg like she knew I was going through something terrible. Something I didn't have a name for. Not long after, my phone started buzzing with messages. From old acquaintances, former co-workers of Chase, even unknown numbers. I saw the news. "So sorry. Do you know where he is? If you still care about him at all, please say something." I turned on the TV, and there, on the local channel, was the headline. "Local businessman missing after financial lawsuit and painful divorce." The broadcast showed a photo of Chase back when he was a sales team lead at Midfield Industrial. Another picture, clearly from social media, showed him and me at a Christmas party 3 years ago, back when I still wore bold makeup and smiled out of habit. The reporter's tone painted our marriage as full of love. Following a contentious divorce, ex-wife Nora Whitfield cut off contact. According to family, Chase spiraled into a deep crisis. Not a single word about the insults, nothing about the choking, no mention of the child born out of wedlock, or the credit card debt in my name he used to fund client entertainment at Lucky Star Lounge. The news had already written my role. The wife who walked away, the cold-hearted woman. 2 days later, Flora showed up at my door, this time without a fancy handbag or luxury coat. She wore a wrinkled sweater, her hair loose and messy, her eyes bare without a trace of makeup. I didn't open the door immediately. Maple growled softly behind me, but I signaled for her to lie down. Flora pressed her forehead to the glass. "Nora, please, he still hasn't been found. They think he might have—" Her voice broke. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. She stared at me. He wrote your name in the letter. Did you know that? How did you kill him, huh? She whispered, her voice trembling. You drained all the money, you left him right after he lost his job. He had nothing left. I stood still, my hand gripped the edge of the doorframe. No, he did all of that to himself. Flora staggered back a step, then as if a switch flipped, she began to cry. Not screaming, not blaming, just like a mother who had lost a child she never truly understood. I didn't hug her, but I didn't push her away either. Finally, she murmured, "If there's any news, you'll let me know, won't you?" That night I stayed awake. The news reported Chase had possibly jumped into the lake, but his body had not been found. Police stated they could not rule out a staged scene. Curled up on the floor, I played back old messages, the voicemails I had never dared to hear in full. Some had Chase crying and yelling. Others were silent, only his ragged breathing, like he was trying to frighten me. I deleted them one by one, not because I had forgotten, but because I didn't want those words to live in my phone like rust that never stopped spreading. Maple rested her head on my leg, eyes barely open. Outside the window, snow had begun to fall gently. Since the news about Chase broke on TV, I had become a different kind of ghost in my own neighborhood. The downstairs neighbor who once gave me cookies during Christmas no longer invited me for tea. The cashier at the grocery store who used to remember my dog's name now handed me the receipt without a word. A college friend I hadn't spoken to in nearly 10 years messaged me on Facebook. I didn't expect you to be so final. After all, Chase was still your ex-husband. I didn't blame him. Most people only ever know half the story, and usually believe the half that's easier to swallow. A week later, I received an email from an organization called She Stood Still, a nonprofit supporting women who had experienced domestic abuse. The message was from a woman named Melanie who introduced herself as the host of a podcast called The Unheard Room. We're aware of your case. Some people may have heard parts of the story through the media, but if you'd like to tell it in your own voice, we're here to listen. I closed the email, then opened it again. I hesitated for days. At night, I turned on my old phone, the one I used back when I lived with Chase. I scrolled through the Notes app where I had saved his words over the course of nearly 8 years. You spend money like a kid with birthday cash. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't survive. No one else could stand the way you stay silent all day. You shouldn't try so hard, you're already exhausting as you are. I read each line, and then I read the lines I had written afterward. Hands shaking, heart racing, pain that had nowhere else to go. Today he laughed out loud when I asked about the savings account. Said, "You're just asking to sound smart, right?" And everyone laughed along. I used to wonder if I died, would anyone actually notice? Maple lay at my feet, chin resting on the mattress, eyes heavy. I sat by the window, streetlight casting shadows on my trembling hands. And I thought, silence is a choice too. But who will hear the ones who've never been given a voice? The podcast recording took place in a small studio at the local community center. No cameras, just a microphone, a bottle of water, a box of tissues, and Melanie's voice. Gentle, non-judgmental. The brown leather chair felt firm beneath me as I faced a wall lined with acoustic foam. I said I was a little nervous. Melanie smiled, resting her hand on the table. "That's okay, this is your space, we're here to listen." I took a deep breath, and I began to speak. Not with Chase's disappearance, not with the suicide note, but with the first time he said, "Ha ha ha, good thing you landed me, anyone else would've left you." I talked about the cold dinners where I had to laugh because everyone else was laughing, even when all I wanted was to disappear from the table. I talked about the photo in the coat pocket, the fake birth certificate, the choking in the dark, and the long, suffocating silence no one dared to name. I didn't speak to gain sympathy. I spoke so I could finally hear myself say, "I survived." When I stopped, Melanie didn't speak right away. She simply handed me a tissue. Then she gently asked, "Would you like to say something to the women who are standing where you once stood? I used to think I had to endure everything to preserve a family, but now I understand. A real family doesn't require you to disappear piece by piece. A man who loves you doesn't ask you to shrink so he can feel bigger." When I stepped out of the studio, autumn wind rustled the trees in the front yard. Maple was waiting in the car, head tilted like she was expecting someone else to come out. But today, I was the one she waited for. I wasn't a shadow anymore. And I wasn't afraid to speak of what had once been taken. The podcast aired on a quiet Thursday morning, just like any other day. I didn't expect much. I thought maybe a few people would listen. Most would scroll past it, like another random headline lost in the noise of the internet. But within 24 hours, my inbox was full of messages. Not from reporters, but from women. Strangers from small towns, big cities, and places I'd never even heard of. I lived through 12 years of marriage exactly like what you described. I never dared to call it abuse, not until I heard your voice. My husband never hit me, but he made me feel so useless I wanted to vanish. Thank you for naming that. I read every word, and for the first time in months, I cried. Not out of pain, but because, for once, I didn't feel alone in the damage. The podcast was quickly shared across platforms. A major women's forum reposted a clip of me saying, "It's not the punch that breaks you. It's the daily repetition of a phrase. You're not good enough. You're too sensitive. No one else could love you but me." Those words kill you slowly without leaving a bruise. One woman sent me a screenshot of a message she sent to her mother after listening to the podcast. "I'm sorry I never told you. But I've lived in fear for the past 4 years, and now I want to be free. I never thought a voice like mine, unsteady, sometimes trembling, could reach anyone. But it turns out the most powerful sound isn't always a scream. Sometimes it's a whisper that finally finds the courage to be heard." A local radio station invited me to join a panel on emotional abuse in marriage. I declined. I didn't want to become a symbol. I just wanted to be a woman who had once been made small and no longer was. The organization She Stood Still invited me to meet women currently in recovery. They didn't ask me to teach or inspire, they simply asked, "Would you sit with us?" In a small room at the community center, I sat in a circle of women, some still bearing bruises, others reborn under new names. No cameras, no microphones, only sighs, quiet sobs, and gentle nods when someone shared that she wasn't allowed to call her mother, or had been mocked for cutting her hair short, or scolded for cooking rice too dry. When it was my turn, I didn't retell the whole story. I said, "We were taught that if no one hit us or cursed at us, then nothing was wrong. But we were bent, day by day, little by little, and now, if we can straighten ourselves back out, we'll see. We were never meant to be folded like that." An older woman named Marlene, sitting to my left, held my hand after the meeting. She whispered, "My husband passed away 10 years ago. But today's the first time I've admitted I was afraid to sleep beside him." I squeezed her hand gently, said nothing. We understood each other in that silence. Flora, Chase's mother, sent me a handwritten letter. There was no apology, no attempt to explain, only one line. "My son grew up in a house where no one spoke the truth." Maybe that was the greatest tragedy. I don't know where she is now, but I keep that letter in a small wooden frame. Not for forgiveness, but to remind myself. Truth may not free everyone, but it saves the one who tells it. 6 months have passed since that podcast recording. Life didn't magically transform like in books, but it shifted quietly, like a seed cracking open underground, slow, persistent, unseen. I now work part-time at a nonprofit called Wellspring Voices, which supports women recovering from financial and emotional abuse. The job isn't flashy, but it gives me a quiet sense of purpose. I help manage workshops, teach budgeting, how to open personal accounts, and more importantly, I listen. We work in a small renovated community library, where the lighting is always soft and the walls are lined with handwritten notes from women who've made it through. I don't apologize anymore for surviving. I don't need to shrink to make someone else feel whole. I wear a simple name tag, Nora Lane, financial support and personal independence. No one here knows I used to be the woman standing in the dark behind her own front door for 8 years. Or if they do, they don't ask. And I'm grateful for that. One late Friday afternoon after work, I stopped by a tiny pawn shop near the subway station. The owner, Mr. Grady, recognized me, even though it had been almost a year since I last walked in. "Still got that silver necklace," he said, pulling a small velvet-lined box from the drawer beneath the counter. The teardrop-shaped silver necklace with a faint green stone, my only birthday gift from Chase during our first year of marriage, before everything began to shift. I had sold it for $40 to cover the deposit on my first apartment. At the time, I told myself its value wasn't in the metal, but in the decision to leave. But today, I wanted it back, not as a keepsake, but as a reminder that I didn't break. "Same price," Mr. Grady smiled. "And this time, it's going home with the winner." I thanked him and stepped out, the necklace warm in my hand. The cool touch of metal against my skin brought a strange feeling. What I felt wasn't pain or regret. It was something quieter. Peace. The following week, while shelving books in the children's reading corner at the library, I heard soft footsteps and a young girl's voice. "Are you the lady from the podcast?" I looked up. She was about 8, with brown pigtails, clutching a book almost bigger than her face. Her mother stood near the front desk, holding a counseling registration form. I didn't ask how she recognized me. The podcast didn't have a picture, just a voice. Maybe that's what it was. Or maybe it was something in the eyes. Something people who've walked through darkness see in one another. I crouched down to her level and smiled. "I'm someone who used to think I was invisible, but not anymore." She nodded like she understood, then pushed the book into my hands. "I think you'll like this one. The main character isn't good at fighting, but she's smart and kind." I looked at the cover, an old comic about a brave girl searching for her true voice in a cursed kingdom. I thanked her, then watched her mother walk over. The woman nodded gently, eyes shining with something very real. No words needed. I had once been her. And now, I was the one standing on the other side of the bridge. As evening fell, I closed the reading room and turned on the small desk lamp. Warm yellow light glowed across my hands. Steadier now than they used to be. The silver necklace brushed against my skin each time I moved. A familiar feeling, but no longer a weight. Maple lay beneath the desk, breathing softly. Outside the window, branches swayed in the light breeze of early season. I sat down, opened my laptop, and began outlining next week's financial counseling session. This time with a new topic: how to build an emergency budget when leaving a toxic relationship. I once wrote it for myself. Now, I write it for women still fumbling through the dark, to let them know it might take time. You might have to sell the last necklace you own. But one day, you'll find yourself, and no longer be a shadow in someone else's story. Have you ever felt like you had to shrink yourself to keep someone else comfortable? Have you ever walked out a familiar door with no idea where you were going, only knowing that if you stayed one more night you'd lose yourself? My story doesn't have a fairy tale ending, but it has something more important. I became the woman I hope my daughter, or anyone feeling lost, can look at and know. Freedom isn't selfish. It's necessary. If you've ever felt silenced or made to question your own worth, I hope you'll leave a comment. You don't have to say everything. Just a period, a nod, a sign that you're not alone. And if you'd like to keep hearing stories about strength, about family, about everyday women who are quietly brave, don't forget to subscribe.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.